Before we begin, I want you to pause for a moment and think about this question. If your life stays exactly the same for the next 5 years, who would be responsible for that outcome? Most people will say circumstances, luck, or opportunity, but the truth is far more uncomfortable. Your future is being shaped every single day by the voices you allow around you. Some of those voices sound supportive, some sound caring, and some sound familiar, but not all of them want you to rise. Here's the reality no one warns you about. The people who can do the most damage to your life rarely look like enemies. They don't announce themselves, they don't attack you openly, they sit beside you, laugh with you, advise you, and sometimes even claim they love you. And slowly, quietly, they influence how big you think, how bold you act, and how far you're willing to go. This isn't a speech about blaming others, it's about awareness. Because once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. You'll start noticing why certain conversations leave you drained, why some advice makes you hesitate, and why certain relationships feel safe but keep you stuck. By the end of this video, you won't just recognize the 7 types of people who can secretly ruin your life. You'll understand how to protect your energy, your vision, and your future without anger, guilt, or fear. If you're serious about growth, about becoming the person you know you're capable of becoming, then stay with me till the end. What you're about to hear might make you uncomfortable, but it might also be the turning point that changes everything. Not everyone who smiles at you wants you to win. And this is one of the hardest truths to accept because humans are wired to trust positive signals. A smile feels safe, encouragement feels supportive, and familiarity feels loyal, but success demands discernment beyond surface behavior. Many people are comfortable with you only as long as you remain predictable, equal, or slightly behind them. When you start aiming higher, your growth quietly disrupts the balance they were used to, and that's when hidden intentions begin to show. Some people smile because they like who you are today, not because they believe in who you are becoming. There are individuals who enjoy your presence because it validates their own choices. As long as your life reflects their limits, they feel justified. But when you push beyond those limits, your ambition becomes uncomfortable for them. They may still smile, still listen, still show up, yet their words begin to carry subtle resistance. They question your decisions under the mask of concern, they downplay your wins as luck, and they magnify risks to sound realistic. None of this looks like sabotage on the surface, but it slowly erodes confidence if you're not aware. This kind of opposition is dangerous because it's passive. It doesn't confront you head on, it seeps into your thinking over time. When someone consistently reacts with hesitation instead of belief, doubt starts to feel reasonable. You begin second-guessing ideas that once felt clear. Momentum weakens not because you lack ability, but because the environment around you no longer fuels conviction. Smiles without alignment create confusion, and confusion is a silent killer of progress. It's also important to understand that this doesn't always come from jealousy or malice. Often it comes from fear. Fear of being left behind, fear of change, fear of facing their own unrealized potential. Your growth forces comparison, and comparison triggers defense mechanisms. Smiling becomes a way to stay close while emotionally resisting your advancement. Learning this keynote is about emotional intelligence, not bitterness. It's about observing patterns instead of expressions. Support is revealed through consistency, not compliments. Real allies challenge you to grow, celebrate action, and don't shrink when you expand, when you recognize that smiles are not proof. F of loyalty, you stop outsourcing belief and start trusting your own vision even when approval disappears. Comfort seekers will sabotage your growth not because they hate you, but because your ambition threatens the life they've chosen. These are people who prioritize ease, routine, and emotional safety above progress. They build their identity around staying comfortable, avoiding risk, and maintaining balance at all costs. When you start pushing yourself, waking up earlier, working longer, thinking bigger, or choosing discipline over pleasure, it disrupts their sense of normal. Your growth becomes a reminder that more is possible, and that reminder creates discomfort they don't want to face. At first, their resistance feels caring. They tell you to slow down, to relax, to not be so hard on yourself. They frame comfort as self-love and discipline as burnout. They'll say things like, life isn't that serious, or you're doing too much, making it sound like ambition is a flaw instead of a strength. Over time, these messages chip away at your standards. You begin to question whether your drive is healthy, whether your goals are worth the effort, whether comfort is the smarter choice. Comfort seekers sabotage growth subtly. They don't forbid you from improving, they normalize stagnation. They celebrate weekends wasted, routines skipped, and goals postponed. When you share wins, they change the subject. When you share struggles, they use it as evidence that pushing yourself isn't worth it. Their lifestyle depends on the belief that effort leads to pain, so your success threatens the story they tell themselves to stay where they are. The danger lies in proximity. The more time you spend around comfort-driven people, the more their habits feel reasonable. Missed workouts become understandable. Procrastination feels justified. Delayed dreams start sounding responsible. Growth requires tension, and comfort seekers remove that tension by encouraging ease, not excellence. They don't pull you down aggressively, they invite you to sit still with them. This isn't about cutting everyone off or becoming cold, it's about recognizing influence. Comfort is addictive, and people who protect it will unconsciously protect it in you too. If you don't guard your standards, you'll slowly trade potential for convenience, ambition for approval, and long-term fulfillment for short-term relief, all while being told you're doing the healthy thing. Chronic critics drain momentum and confidence because their influence operates at the psychological level rather than the practical one. These are people who always have something to point out, something to correct, something to question, yet rarely offer solutions or take action themselves. Their criticism isn't designed to sharpen you, it's designed to keep you hesitant. Over time, constant exposure to this energy conditions your mind to associate action with judgment, and hesitation replaces decisiveness. What makes chronic critics especially dangerous is their consistency. A single critical comment can be ignored, but repeated doubt slowly reshapes self-belief. They react to your ideas with skepticism, to your progress with caution, and to your ambition with warnings. Even when they're right about small details, the cumulative effect is erosion. You start editing yourself before you speak. You delay execution because you're preemptively preparing for their response. Momentum fades not because you're incapable, but because your confidence is under constant audit. Chronic critics often disguise themselves as realists or perfectionists. They claim they're only trying to help, that they're being honest, that someone needs to point out the flaws. But honesty without encouragement becomes discouragement. Perfection without progress becomes paralysis. Their focus on what could go wrong overshadows what could be built. While they analyze, you stall. While they talk, time passes. Another reason their presence is so damaging is that criticism triggers emotional fatigue. Each interaction feels heavy. You walk away second-guessing instead of energized. Over time, this emotional tax makes growth feel exhausting. You begin associating ambition with stress and self-doubt rather than excitement and purpose. The brain naturally avoids what feels painful, so it starts avoiding big moves altogether. Many chronic critics aren't intentionally malicious. Often, they're projecting their own fear of failure. By highlighting risks in your path, they justify not taking risks themselves. If they can convince you to stay cautious, they don't have to confront their own inaction. Your boldness challenges their self-image, so they neutralize it with doubt. The cost of keeping chronic critics close is invisible but massive. Ideas die before they're tested, confidence weakens quietly, progress slows while life keeps moving forward. Growth thrives in environments of belief, action, and constructive challenge, not in spaces where every step forward is met with another reason to pause. Victim-minded people normalize failure by turning struggle into an identity instead of a phase. They don't see obstacles as challenges to overcome, but as proof that success is reserved for others. Everything that goes wrong becomes evidence that the world is against them, the system is rigged, or they were never meant to win. When you spend time around this mindset, failure stops feeling temporary and starts feeling inevitable. And that belief quietly reshapes how you approach effort, risk, and responsibility. These people speak in explanations rather than solutions. They always have a reason why something didn't work, and those reasons sound convincing. Bad timing, lack of support, unfair rules, past trauma, or other people's mistakes become the narrative. Over time, accountability disappears. When accountability disappears, growth has nowhere to anchor. If nothing is your responsibility, then nothing is truly in your control, and that belief kills initiative faster than any external obstacle ever could. Victim-minded individuals are dangerous because they make stagnation feel normal. They surround failure with empathy but remove urgency from improvement. They validate giving up by calling it self-protection. They turn quitting into wisdom and settling into realism. When you talk about pushing harder, they remind you of how hard life already is. When you talk about discipline, they accuse you of being insensitive or unrealistic. Their language sounds compassionate, but the underlying message is always the same. Don't try too hard, because trying and failing hurts. Being around this mindset slowly lowers your standards. You start tolerating results you once would have rejected. Missed goals become understandable. Broken promises to yourself feel forgivable. Ambition begins to feel naive instead of necessary. The danger isn't that they discourage you directly, it's that they reframe failure as something to accept instead of something to outgrow. Victim-minded people often resist your progress because it disrupts their worldview. If you succeed despite obstacles, their excuses lose power. Your growth threatens the story that circumstances are stronger than choice, so they unconsciously pull you back into shared helplessness, where no one has to change and no one has to take responsibility. Failure is part of growth, but it should never be normalized as a destination. When failure becomes an identity, effort becomes optional and discipline feels pointless. Staying too long around people who see themselves as powerless can slowly convince you to shrink your own sense of agency, until you forget that progress has always belonged to those who refuse to stay in the role of the victim. Energy vampires disguise themselves as friends, and their danger lies in how invisible their impact is at first. These are people who don't necessarily insult you, discourage you openly, or end your goals directly. Instead, they drain you emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically through constant need, negativity, or dependence. After spending time with them, you feel heavier, less focused, and strangely unmotivated. Even if the conversation itself didn't seem negative on the surface, they often position themselves as people who just need to talk or are going through a lot. While everyone needs support at times, energy vampires operate in one direction only. They unload problems, frustrations, and emotional chaos without any intention of solving them. Advice is ignored, patterns repeat, and nothing changes. You become a dumping ground rather than a partner in growth. Over time, this dynamic steals the energy you need for your own goals. The most damaging part is how this drains your cognitive bandwidth. Focus is a limited resource when your mind is occupied with other people's unresolved drama. You have less clarity for strategy, creativity, and execution. You may notice you procrastinate more, feel mentally tired earlier in the day, or struggle to maintain discipline. This isn't laziness, it's emotional exhaustion. Success requires sustained energy, and energy vampires quietly deplete it. They also create guilt-based detachment. If you pull away, you feel selfish. If you prioritize yourself, you feel cruel. They may not say it outright, but their behavior implies that your availability is your value. This keeps you trapped in a cycle where your time and emotional presence are constantly demanded, leaving little room for growth or recovery. Many energy vampires aren't aware of what they're doing. They've never learned how to self-regulate, self-soothe, or take responsibility for their emotional state. But intent doesn't reduce impact. Repeated exposure trains your nervous system to operate in stress mode. Instead of feeling inspired after interactions, you feel depleted, distracted, and behind. When you allow these dynamics to continue, your life slowly becomes about maintenance instead of momentum. You spend more time managing emotions than building outcomes. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's strategic. Growth thrives in environments that restore and expand your capacity, not ones that constantly consume it without renewal. People who fear change will resist your evolution because your growth forces them to confront what they've avoided in themselves. Change disrupts identity, routine, and comfort, and for many people, stability feels safer than possibility. When you decide to evolve, you step into uncertainty, and that uncertainty makes others uneasy, especially those who have built their lives around predictability. Your transformation becomes a threat, not because it harms them directly, but because it challenges the choices they've made to stay the same. These people often anchor relationships in familiarity. They connect to who you were, not who you are becoming. When you start thinking differently, acting differently, or setting higher standards, they feel like they're losing access to the version of you they understand. Instead of adapting, they try to pull you back into old patterns. They remind you of how you used to be, joke about your past habits, or subtly criticize your new direction. It sounds harmless, but the intention is preservation, not support. Resistance to change rarely shows up as aggression. It appears as nostalgia, skepticism, or concern. They ask why you can't be satisfied with what you already have. They frame evolution as discontent and ambition as ingratitude. Their words encourage maintenance over growth, consistency over courage. Over time, this messaging can make progress feel like betrayal rather than advancement. The danger of staying close to people who fear change is that their fear becomes a brake on your momentum. You start minimizing your goals to avoid conflict. You hesitate to share wins because it creates distance. You downplay your VI so others feel comfortable. This self-editing slowly shrinks your future. Evolution requires space, and resistance consumes that space with doubt and emotional friction. People who fear change often don't intend to hold you back. They simply want the relationship to stay the same. But relationships that don't evolve eventually restrict. If one person grows and the other resists, tension becomes inevitable. Choosing growth means accepting that not everyone will come with you, and that's not a failure, it's alignment. Change is the price of progress. When you allow fear-driven resistance to influence your decisions, you trade potential for approval. Your evolution is not something to apologize for. It's a responsibility to your future, and protecting it sometimes means outgrowing the environments and relationships that can't expand with you. As you move forward, remember that success is not just built by hard work and talent, but by awareness. The people you allow into your inner circle shape your thinking, your habits, and ultimately your destiny. Some will slow you down with comfort, some will exhaust you with negativity, some will confuse you with doubt, and some will resist your growth because it exposes their own fear of change. None of this makes them evil, but it does make them dangerous to your future if you ignore the impact they have on your mindset and momentum. Protecting your vision requires courage, boundaries, and the discipline to choose long-term growth over short-term approval. When you become intentional about who influences you, you reclaim control over your life and create an environment where progress becomes inevitable. I wish you the strength to choose growth, even when it feels uncomfortable, the clarity to recognize influences that no longer serve you, and the courage to keep moving forward without guilt or hesitation. Thank you for taking the time to listen, reflect, and invest in your personal evolution. Your future self will thank you for the decisions you make today.